Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the CAF News. I'm Kevin Donovan. With me, as usual, Bryce. How you doing, Bryce?
Doing really good. Wow, it's going to be a pretty action-packed morning. Uh, I think there's three things we want to look at today. There's a lot of turbulence in the open large language model discussions we'll get into. We're looking at the Stack Overflow and AI, what that actually means these days, and is it relevant? And I think the final topic we want to cover is on tariffs. And what does that mean to IT architects dealing with? I'm in Canada, and I mean, not that, President Trump would ever go on a rampage, but it looks like he has. And what would that mean with tariffs coming out, right? So let's
Justin
start.
Justin got him settled down a little bit.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think Justin just works them up. That's so let's start with open large language models. I think what we're seeing on the one hand is there's some dialogue around, open large language models, making that code available, sharing it. I think this is something DeepSeek is sort of, they've introduced into the mix,
Yeah.
which is interesting, like despite everything else. And yet we're still seeing proprietary releases. Like, for instance, Google just released Gemini 2.0. I don't see a shift to open yet. And I don't know what's happening with, OpenAI. Where is this going, Kevin? What are your thoughts around the large language models and this focus? Should it be proprietary, not? What do some of the leaders think? What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, we alluded to it, I believe, in the last episode,
Yeah,
giving some credit to, Eric Raymond and the Cathedral and the Bazaar that, open source in code has won long ago, and it has been a tremendous boon for both individual developers as well as the industry, I feel. And that I thought was really an important part of the DeepSeek fallout, that they were doing it open. It's open source. Credit to Mark Zuckerberg. Meta's Llama is open source as well.
yeah,
And then, kind of out of nowhere, Sam Altman admits that OpenAI, may be on the wrong side of history. He said that they need to figure out a different open source strategy. Although, this is not an opinion shared by everyone at OpenAI. He's,
yeah.
cover my ass a little bit, but I think it's really interesting that, there is this tension between innovation control and open accessibility, and, you know, the large proprietary models of today may not be the winners tomorrow. And I think he's really considering and looking at that.
That's a really great point. Especially, I mean, I don't think DeepSeek was what we thought it was. However, they have brought in some interesting ideas. Like if you are working with an open model and you want to make it hybrid, you want to work on it, we probably can get a lot more done in terms of innovation, opening that code up, making it available, and letting people sort of, review it, give us feedback, and evolve it, maybe even quicker than an NVIDIA. Now, having said that, sorry, not maybe even quicker than an OpenAI. So having said that, now that that really raises an interesting point on the adoption of this. And do you see the enterprises favoring one or the other going forward, Kevin? Um,
That's a good question. Cryptographic standards have long been open because more eyes see more
yes.
bugs, and it makes for transparency and trust. There might be similar analogies here in the, LLM space. It's interesting that Sam Altman is pondering about this openly. OpenAI, of course, wants to own the future, and the future may just want to be free. I think you mentioned, Gemini 2.0 coming out. Google has a long history of open sourcing and even, making very important research papers free and open and available. The entire transformer concept, all you need is attention. Um, they could possibly even preempt a move by Sam Altman.
Well, I want to bring a curve into this now that we haven't talked about yet this morning. Recently, NVIDIA is forming a major partnership with Accenture. They've announced.
Oh. Hmm.
And do you see that would something like that would build on open code, or do you think that like do you see it staying proprietary? Like, how would you see somebody like an Accenture playing in this market with open interfaces and stuff? Is that a win, or is that a big nothing burger?
Well, I mean, who hasn't NVIDIA, made a partnership with, I guess.
True, that's
And
true.
and
Yeah,
consultancies and system integrators generally benefit from open source because they don't want to have to be including proprietary technologies and licenses and deal with, not being able to see the code. So that generally favors, consultancies. Um, I don't know where that would land
I
in
certainly
importance.
believe that with this opening, I think it's going to accelerate adoption and really even like increase the demand even more for powerful chips as people start to evolve this code and
Oh,
maybe even enhance it with
absolutely.
new capabilities, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, NVIDIA doesn't care, open or closed, as long as there's more demand.
As long as there's more demand. So let's go to the next point. So this is something I'll maybe get you to sort of do an overview for us. I thought this was so cool. Stack Overflow and large
Oh,
language models. And
yeah.
this may be a feature that doesn't have any room anymore, or like what's up with
Yeah.
that, Kevin? You're
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, the headline should probably be, I mean, are LLMs making Stack Overflow irrelevant is kind of the question, but it's also simply the growing predominance of these IDEs, integrated developer environments that are, LLM fueled. There was data showing that Stack Overflow traffic had dropped to like 2009 levels. And it is most likely, I mean, as a developer, I know that I used to use it whenever I got some inscrutable error message or exception and would copy and paste it in and look for someone who had run into it also. But now, if you're in an environment with Copilot, or if you're using Cursor or Replit, which are amazing tools, try them out. If you haven't tried one out recently, make sure you have an hour or two if you like to code. But these things, they're writing 99.9% of the code. And when they then run into an error, and it won't be syntactical. I don't think I've even seen a syntactical error yet. But as they're building functionality, you can have, a function or something that, uh, for example, you're inserting into a database and the customer ID is an integer, and then you add a service and it sends a customer ID that is alphanumeric.
yes.
Pretty common. That's going to fail. It tells you what happened, suggests the fix, shows you the SQL to change the schema, and just asks if you wouldn't please hit the apply button if you'd like to apply this code when you've reviewed it, and you're done. And
Well, and this is
that is
really interesting.
bypassing
This
Stack
is
Overflow.
really interesting because yeah, and let me sort of the next thought that comes out of this to me is this primarily a boon for developers that
Yeah.
are able to use it?
Yeah.
Or, the first thought would be, and we talked about this again before the call a little bit, or is this something that can make this more accessible to everyone? But it doesn't look like everyone's using it yet. I mean,
No, no, I mean, it's early days for
yeah,
sure, but the the level of proficiency is really, really good already. You do need to be a developer. This is not for citizen developer.
okay,
It's going to tell you that, um, you know, it's going to say things like referential integrity and,
Yes.
integer and things like that. And a lot of people would be like, what? But in many cases, it's just asking you to hit the apply button or fix button.
Yes.
Um, Now, I have not played with these things much more than building kind of little toys. I don't know how they act and react when you get up to a code base of size, something doing something significant. There, it may even be a longer time before someone who has no coding background can actually make something of value. But it's moving in that direction, that's for sure. They save huge swaths of time for
So
developers.
what I just heard you say, and I'm just going to sort of translate this, a year in the future, we're talking, it's 2026 CAF news. And what I'm hearing is that some small business person will want to do something on their site, maybe add a shopping cart in there, and they'll just go and they'll say, please ChatGPT or whatever, please give me the, whatever I need to do this. And it will probably even give them the instructions, maybe even a script and the code and everything. And they'll just update their website perhaps in the future with what they
Oh
need
yeah, and
seamlessly.
no script, no code that it gives them. It will just show them a mock-up of the interface and say, does this look good? Yes. And it won't be a mock-up, actually. It will be the HTML or templated TSX or
Okay.
whatever. And then you'll just say, yeah, that looks good. And say, great, let's start working out the checkout flow. I'll create these database tables to support that.
Yep.
And this will be your cart. And who would you like to use for payment? And you'll
And so
say,
this is a real move from just a knowledge provider to really agentic involvement with
oh,
something
they
that's like
are
a,
absolutely functioning as agents. Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
with like
Individual
my,
agents, not multiple yet, but that'll happen as well.
that's months
Yeah.
away, right? Like once you get one
Yeah, that's
agent,
months away.
yeah, that's at the rate we're going. We got lots of time on that one.
Yeah,
Uh,
that'll happen
it
in 2025 for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
interesting.
it's absolutely incredible. If you have an hour for fire up, replit.com or Cursor if you want to download
So Kevin, I'm going to
and
stop
take
you
a
right
look.
there. I looked at replit.com. I'm looking at it right now,
Yeah.
and my first thought was like, oh no, this is more than an hour. This is my day gone as
Oh
I search
yeah,
into it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Definitely. But fascinating. I saw a quote from someone, Stack Overflow is getting hurt here.
Yeah.
Prototyping tools, also Figma and those kinds. People are like, why would I make a mock-up in Figma when I can just create a clickable prototype in 10 minutes in Replit?
Wow.
You
Okay.
don't, you don't have to like borrow from the iOS library and pull a button and write login and all that. You just say, make me a login screen for an iOS app. Boom. It literally will be done in 2 minutes and you'll be looking
Wow.
at it. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's happening so
Yes.
quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It spits out
Third,
the code. It's really kind of cool. They do like they know that it's cool. So they do like this almost matrix like the code just flies out and it smears as it falls into place.
it's
It's
awesome.
incredible how fast it generates all this stuff.
So
Just
that
amazing.
brings us now to the third point. And this is me as a Canadian. I don't know how hard hit the European Union is exactly, but I mean, we're looking at the US starting to drive out restrictions and tariffs.
Mm.
And I mean, in Canada right now, I don't think Mr. Trump would ever go on a rampage and just start threatening tariffs willy-nilly, but it looks that way. And, we went through this cycle. We may still be in it. I mean, there's some talk that, we've avoided the tariffs, but I mean, in a month, we're going to be looking at this again. There's talk of industry specific tariffs that might get, introduced. And I think this has huge implications for the adoption of supply chains and being resilient, including if we look at AI as a commodity service as part of that supply chain and tariffs getting stuck on AI. And I'm really seeing that, in terms of architects, one of the key skills. And this is something that, ISA Global is really focused on with a bit of Bach and some of their core courses. But I think even more than ever, architects are going to really need to understand how to deal with that supply chain with their architectures from a value-driven perspective as things like tariffs and restrictions are introduced. Not to even mention regulatory differences. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yeah, you brought that angle up, and it had not occurred to me previously. Of course, yeah, the US is tightening tariffs, and that, mostly against China, but yeah, Mexico and Canada also. Then if you're outside the US, a service provider like OpenAI, if you're using their models and their services in your applications, what happens when there's a tariff? Cheap and fast, the price of cheap and fast just went up. And so, yeah, do you start to favor domestic production? Open source starts to become much more important. Grab that DeepSeek model off a Hugging Face and, start running it locally.
And I think there's something general that needs to fit into like sustainable practices with supply chain resilience. I mean, how many times have our supply chains just been in recent times just been knocked apart? We saw that with COVID, and now we're seeing it with potential tariffs, and we haven't even seen the counter tariffs come in yet. I really think, well, in good news, and it's appropriate. I think there's a Chinese curse, I believe. May you live in interesting times. And we certainly are living in interesting times, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it brings to mind some parallels that we've always had to deal with. Data governance.
Yes.
With GDPR in Europe, I can't store a contact's information in AWS East 1. That's a no-go. It has to be within, possibly within Germany or possibly within the EU. There may come similar restrictions on where and what models you can be using for AI applications.
Well, and that's really interesting. One of the tools that actually we've been working on with some of our clients at Deep Dive has been around just even tracing the inputs to a large language model so that you understand, where you're pulling data from. And then if you don't know where you're pulling it from, you can't make decisions around governance that you're talking to, right? And this really becomes super critical. Understanding from a governance point of view, where's that data? Where does it reside? Can I make decisions about where I'm going to target it given these changes? And up till now, I think a lot of these things could have just sort of been assumed into the woodwork. They were nothing burgers, right? Now they're like, the angry Whopper from Burger King, complete with jalapenos and a bit of spice. And we have to deal with that, right? Like there's a lot happening there now.
Yeah, you do definitely need to be building in pluggability into your service provider frameworks, for sure, more than ever.
Wow. Lots of ground today. Looking forward to meeting next week to see what happens. I think literally this is so exciting. We're seeing new advancements that used to take months to years, literally on a weekly basis right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the final comment is that as an architect, maintaining a learning mindset has never been so important.
Yeah, good point. Absolutely.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll see you next week. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See ya.